Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 6th episode of the Gabriel Al-Salem Foundation's live series, Consulting Without Borders Perspectives, in which we feature prominent international consultants and experts engaging in work related to global challenges. Today is August 1st, last month of the summer. I hope you are enjoying it wherever you are now. Please let us know in the comments where you are tuning in from. My name is Victoria Olskaya. I'm broadcasting today from Charlotte in North Carolina in the United States. I'm the president of Gabriel Al-Salem Foundation, which is a US-based nonprofit organization which works internationally and which mission is to create connections, promote excellence, and build a sustainable future for all. I'm being helped today by Anya Al-Salem, who is running the backstage of this broadcast. Our guest today is joining us from New Delhi, India. Mr. Sanjay Saxena is Managing Director of Total Synergy Consulting, which is based out of New Delhi and which is providing consulting services for development sector projects worldwide. Sanjay has worked on more than 150 development projects in 35 countries with various international donor organizations. He is a fellow cost and management accountant. He holds an international postgraduate diploma in urban management and planning and advanced diplomas in computer software applications. Sanjay has been working extensively in 4 areas: governance, e-governance, public financial management, and monitoring and evaluation. He has published over 170 books on these subjects, and these books have been used in over 700 colleges and universities in India as a course material for graduate and postgraduate students. This is actually not the first time that Sanjay is joining our events. He already participated in our conference on February 1st in 2021, and he joined 2 of our panels, one on happiness and the other one on partnerships. I'm seeing comments coming in. Anya is saying hi from North Carolina. Is there anybody else? Mr. Stefan Kaplan also commenting that it's wonderful to be here. I see it in the comments. Well, I would like to welcome Sanjay. I'm bringing him here. And today, he will be sharing his 30-year consulting experience working worldwide on various projects. And he will be specifically focusing on the topic of resilience, why it matters, and why it matters specifically in consulting practice and our everyday life. Welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. Very nice to be here, and thanks for having me over.
Thank you. Yes, it was, I actually, as I was preparing for this broadcast, I looked back at the time when we did have a very interesting discussion, a panel discussion at that time about happiness during our conference a year and a half ago. And I think that our today's topic, resilience, as we identified it, is very much related to happiness, both individual happiness and the societal happiness. So for us to start, maybe you can explain to us what resilience is and why it is so important.
Yes, I think there. First of all, I think I may begin by saying there is a very close relationship between resilience and happiness, simply because we as individuals, humans, and also collectively as a society, We are faced with hardships, big and small, all the time. We face hardships all the time. Some of them are small, little, minor events, like as if our internet connection were to go down at this point in time. This will be a minor hardship, though it'll be catastrophic consequences
That's
for our
true.
talk. Or it could be life-changing, hardships. In many cases, loss of a dear one, or a huge financial loss, which we can't as an individual level. So we, at various points in time, right through our, journey in life, we do face a lot of hardships. And I think our success, both professionally and personally, and when I say personally, this includes emotionally and spiritually, and in all aspects of well-being, is dependent on our ability to bounce back from these hardships. How are we able to respond to these? Because many of these changes, if not all the changes, are beyond our control. So although while we can plan for some of them to mitigate the impact of these hardships, and the most obvious example could be a most simplest obvious example is that we take insurance, we take a medical insurance in case we should we have a medical emergency. That's why we have a medical insurance, or we take a life insurance for the loss of life of dear closed ones. Uh, but our ability to recover quickly and then adapt to the new circumstances in case of such hardships defines our success in life. That's why I think resilience is very, very, very important. And I think there has been countless academic studies which have proven that there's a very high degree of correlation between people who are more resilient and their happiness. People who have the ability to bounce back and they're also more likely to be more successful and more happier. More importantly, more happier. So I think
Uh,
that's in yeah.
yes, this is very good comments. This is very good, definition of resilience, and as it is relating to happiness. Uh, just like happiness, would you say that resilience is something that a person is born with, or is this something that we can develop or possibly learn in our life?
It's a very interesting question. Yes, to some extent, some people have a higher, let's say, just as some people have a higher degree of positivity. Some people are naturally more ebullient. They are naturally more chirpy. They are naturally more cheerful. Or they are more easygoing, or they are less affected. So while to some extent it is true that some people who are more positive oriented, they have a higher resilience, but by no means this is, I think it's also an attitude which can be acquired. A lot of people, with training and with consciousness, we can increase our resilience, and also learn in some ways to be resilient. And certainly in other than the well-being, there are many aspects of our well-being, and in many aspects of those well-being, as I just gave an example of a, let's say, a medical insurance. We take medical insurance in the eventuality that we fall sick and we have a major ailment. So we don't it doesn't result in a financial loss. We can mitigate and become more resilient, so that we are not every event, every disaster doesn't becoming a life-threatening disaster. So resilience is also an attitude. It's also in some ways a skill. You can plan for it. You can see what risks you are faced as an individual, and we all do this in small ways and big. That's why we do retirement planning. What will happen when I retire and I stop having a stable source of income? So to answer your question, while some people have it inbuilt in terms of their happiness or being positive, but even positive attitude now is universally acknowledged, is something that you can learn. You can learn to be positive, and by practice, you can get better at it.
Well, thank you. As I was preparing for this broadcast, I actually I looked it up. I just thought, what would be examples of things that we need to do to become more resilient, and I can share a few, but I'm just interested in what you can also share, because you have such a broad experience working with people all over the globe, and you also wrote books, and I can imagine that at least some of those books were related to how to handle stress and how to handle the difficult situations, not just for us as individuals, but also in the workplace or in the society. What I was coming up with when I was looking up resilience is that first, we as people and dealing with adversities in our personal life, we need to learn to relax. We need to practice thought awareness, meaning that push away, negative thinking, just trying to focus on the positive. Is that correct? Then it would be good to also edit your outlook on life, how to think about negative events, and instead of maybe totally brushing them off, actually acknowledge them and basically learn from them. Is this something that you would be thinking about in terms of how to learn to be resilient?
Absolutely. I think you said it very well. I think that the first of all, I think any kind of problem, the first thing that it requires is an acknowledgement. Many times, we have difficulty in acknowledging. We sometimes tend to, be in a mode of denial. We refuse to acknowledge that there is a problem. So I think, like with any case, in case you're faced with any kind of adversity, big or small, I think the first thing is the first step, obviously, is also to acknowledge that there is a problem and that problem needs correction. And then to move on and say, yes, there is a problem, but I can solve this. This can do attitude is very important. This positive outlook to say that yes, there is a problem, but I can solve this problem. The other day, I was listening to this very interesting American investor, Mark Cuban, who's a billionaire and who comes on Shark Tank, and he's a very generally he's a very motivational figure. He gives a lot of motivational talks and all. And he was asked that what do you think separates the people who are more successful or more happy from the rest? What is a single thing? If there was one thing that if you were to point out, what is it that you think separates them from the rest? And he gave a very very good and very interesting answer. He said that only six words only six words separate the so-called winners from the not from the ones who don't win so often. And those six words are, uh, I will do whatever it takes.
Mm.
Right? So whether it is to build a new future for yourself, or it's to get a new job, or to get a new contract, or if you want to have your dream house, or you want to whatever it. So basically, this ability, the grit, the determination to say that I will do whatever it takes, whatever is required to achieve this goal. So this clarity of goal and then single-minded pursuit of that goal is obviously extremely helpful. Then it helps. Then everything comes naturally to you once you decide on something. And that's why people who face adversity, I think this feeling of determination and this feeling of grit, that I have it in me to get out of this situation, is paramount, is absolutely paramount. And it's here, I think that's there, Victoria, this will resonate with you. And it's to have a supportive ecosystem around us, whether it's your family, immediate family, or your larger family, or your friends, or your social peer group, whichever group that you belong, whatever groups that you belong to. Those play a very 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 important part. If I may commit a small digression, I would like to quote another anecdote, which is not directly related to this, but this has a bearing. In Japan, there is a province, there is an area called Okinawa. And Okinawa has a phenomenal track record of maximum number of septuagenarians and nonagenarians. They have many people, the number of people who live above the age of 80, 90, even 100. So as a proportion of the population, that's the area which has the highest number of people who live so long. So longevity, and there are many research studies which have been conducted there. And what are the reasons why people live so long there? And there are, of course, the somewhat predictable reasons is their diet. It's a very healthy lifestyle. These two are more obvious. I think one would not normally think of it. Third, which is not so obvious, but which in their study was found to be the second biggest reason after diet, was actually a, a very supportive social system, a very supportive group, a supporting network. So they meet all these, people, elderly people. They meet every evening. They talk. They drink tea. They chat. They exchange jokes. They laugh. So even when they have personal adversities, the fact that they have a collective, they feel it is any tragedy or any problem is not individual, but it's collective. And I have a group of people with whom I can share it with. And there are a group of people who are going to stand behind me and trying to help me, to support, to come out of it. So that is interestingly came out as the very, very significant reason why people live so happy lives over there, and why they're so resilient as a community.
That's very true. I totally agree to that, and I can also say that from my own experience, you cannot be happy alone. You to be happy. You can only be collectively happy, and that's probably the big part of it. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Tim Son, who is always here in my broadcast. He was the teacher who taught me to do live streaming. I really appreciated all your support, Tim. And we also have Stefan here, who is joining us, and he has a question, and it's been here for a little bit already. So he feels that the resilience stems from and is fueled by my passion and purpose in life. Thoughts on passion and purpose and resilience.
Absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Stefan. But that's what I was saying, and that's what Mark Cuban was saying. That I will do whatever it takes. That's the passion, and that's the purpose, right? That I will devote my energy, my whatever is available to me, towards the pursuit of whatever, and it may be a simple pursuit of happiness. We very often mix. We all often think that we chase material things, but I think sometimes pursuing happiness in itself is an end in itself, because happiness means so different to different things. Many different things give happiness to different people. So I couldn't agree more. I think unless you have you, and that's the definition of being alive, and that's the only difference between. I think somebody was saying the other day, if you don't have passion, then you're no longer alive. You're dead. That's the only thing that separates us, from inanimate objects. So having a
I
purpose in life.
I cannot agree more. As some of the people who might be in this broadcast or watching it later, they know that I and my family went through a few very hard events. I lost my husband, the father of Anya, who is now helping us on the backstage of this broadcast, and that event turned our life upside down. And as I'm thinking about it, what really helped at that time, in addition to maybe, as some people say, that we are resilient by nature, but it might seem like that, but that's not always what it is. What really helped was, of course, the support of the family, of very close friends who were with us, our people who really helped in all sorts of levels, emotionally, and just getting things done and organizing things and just writing letters and emails. And also what did help, and this is in connection with Stefan's comment or question, is finding a purpose and a passion. And I don't want to sound too dramatic, but starting this foundation in Gabriel's name probably helped, and probably helped me, and then more than it helped anybody else to stay resilient and to move forward with life, and to be and have the energy to bring up Anya and just continue living. So finding something that has a meaning to you as an individual in the difficult times is very important, and I can totally agree with that on my own example.
Yeah. And so look, you converted a personal grief into something which is valuable for everybody else. So now you could have gone inwards And I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to lose a life partner. The grief would have been immense. But you chose to convert this into a very positive thing. You chose it to into a larger purpose, and I think that's what you said earlier is so true. There is no individual happiness as a society, and I think a lot of wars and a lot of problems that we have, we just I think become very selfish. We think very narrowly. We think very narrowly. We don't realize that there is no individual. We are all in the same train. If we don't change the direction of the train, no matter how fast we run or fight or whatever, it's not going to be different. So you chose that personal traumatic to reinvent yourself, and this is perhaps not what you were doing earlier, but you chose to do something and give a larger purpose to your life, and in the process benefited so many other people. So I think that's a wonderful example of how, and that's exactly, we talk about very copybook definitions of, we're talking about nowadays about resilient cities and resilient communities and resilient ecosystems, and it all boils down to this eventually: the ability to develop, to because there will be adversity, and how do you make the most of adversity, and how do you plan, and how do you kind of minimize, and what do you do after the adversity as well, if you can't help it.
Yes, and that would be that's very true, and that would be my next question, because as we agreed, we will talk about individual resilience and then kind of move to societal or community resilience. And just like we discussed, they both are cannot be independent of each other, but they are a little bit, different. And I just remember that also at our last conference in 2021, we actually talked about a VUCA world, and there is this term that comes up. It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and that's what can happen in this world, and making it very difficult for individuals and for the societies and the cities. So I before we move there, let me see. Anya is actually asking a question, or rather making a comment. She says this idea of "I will do whatever it takes" sounds like it can be taken to an extreme that can actually be detrimental to one's health, pushing
True, true,
oneself past
true.
certain important limits. How do we find a balance where this idea remains helpful rather than harmful to one's well-being?
Well-being. No,
That's a
very
good
valid,
question,
very valid.
Anya.
It's a good question, Anya. It's absolutely, because you're absolutely right. I mean, that's what probably separates the manics from the people who are normal. Because if you're going to pursue something, I think what you pursue, I think I'm tempted to quote another great guy, Mahatma Gandhi, and he said that you can't wish away problems, right? There will be problems you will have. You only can choose which problems you will choose to tackle, right? You can choose your problems. We all have small problems, big problems, and large. He chose to free our country from the capitalists, from the British. So he gave his purpose. He, like for the rest of the mortals, could have chosen a very narrow purpose, living his own life as a barrister and earning and becoming a successful lawyer, and then earning and making a big house or buying a big car. He could have chosen that purpose, but he chose a bigger problem to solve and say, I can't be happy in isolation unless my country is free from the yoke of imperialism. We can't be happy as a society. So what you are saying is absolutely right. I mean, anything has to be done within. There has to be a balance, and the trick is to find a larger purpose. The trick is to find something which is bigger than you. It is not aimed very narrowly, and that's why once you do that, then there's a less risk of what you said, that you might harm your health, or you might do something really stupid in the blind pursuit of something. And if I may add a caveat, money on its own can't be a pursuit. It can't be you, if your sole purpose, if you chose, for instance, the most common denominator of success, money, then obviously you're setting up yourself for failure, because you may become very rich, but you're likely to sacrifice a lot of other things in the process, including your health. So very, very true. So anything that you do in life, of course, has to be within You have to have a balanced viewpoint on everything.
Right, I agree. And I know where Anya is coming from in asking this question. I really think that that balance is important, and that's probably part of resilience. If what we do can be called resilience. So in however we react to difficult times or any adverse situations, we need to choose our response. And just like you quoted Mahatma Gandhi, we should choose our problems and our fights, if we want to call them fights. And yeah, we should choose our a response. And in this way, maintaining a balance, of course, it's very important, because if we start harming ourselves even more, then I guess that's not resilience anymore. That's just harming ourselves and making things worse. So it is, tricky how
Yeah, yeah, it is.
we deal with things, but in the end, there are ways to learn these things, and I think we can also practice certain things to stay in this balance and not go overboard in reactions to adverse
Correct.
events.
And especially Anya, as a student, this is a fight which I constantly had, and this is a ongoing thing now with my two sons. I have two sons, and this is an ongoing. India, we have a very, very, very competitive academic system. Just to give you a scale of things, Delhi University. I live in Delhi. Delhi University has probably, if I remember correctly, 90 plus colleges. And unless you score an aggregate of about 95, 96% marks in your high school, you are unlikely to get into any course in any college in Delhi, right? So you people lose seats in quarter of a mark, right? Because there are thousands and thousands of kids who are studying very, very hard to score very high marks. So last year, I forget, I don't remember the numbers that well. There were something like 11,000 kids who got 100% marks, right? So we live in a very, as a student, as a parent also, how far do we push our children to do well academically, and how far do we allow them to maintain a balance, right? Because academics is not the only thing. You may get into a very, very good school, but if you do not have a rounded personality, if that's all you have done, all your knowledge is based upon bookish knowledge, academic knowledge, it is very likely that you may not do very well in the studies and in life later on. And there are countless examples in my own personal experience. People who were toppers in their school, in my school and whatever, have perhaps not done as well as people who chose to develop a more rounded. They were into sports, they were into other activities, they were good at team things, and they made sure that they developed their interpersonal skills and communication skills, things which are invaluable. And unfortunately, very few schools or universities teach you this, and these only are taught outside the class. Unfortunately, you learn these outside the class. So as a school, as a student, I think this balance of pursuing, everybody may want to get into Harvard or Columbia or whichever university you aspire to, but at the same time, and even now, they also look for more rounded students. They are not necessarily looking for the topper. They're looking for people who have done more interesting, more rounded things. So thanks for bringing that point, Anya.
Thank you, Sanjay. Well, I was going to ask you, I know that you published a lot of books, 170 books that are actually used in colleges and universities in India, mostly for graduate and postgraduate levels. So what kind of books are those? What are the subjects? And yeah, if you can just tell us a little bit more about your
Sure,
work.
sure. So as in your introduction, you had mentioned, I was a bit of an interloper. I chose three completely different disciplines. I'm somebody who gets bored very quickly. I like to do things. I constantly like to do new things. So one of the things growing up, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had a very long list of things that I didn't want to do. And doing a 9 to 5 job was certainly at the top of that list. This is something that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to sit in a glass chamber in one of the fancy offices and then, doing something, the same thing day in, day out. Even if that meant that I made a lot of money. I didn't want to be a Wall Street broker. I didn't want to be an investment banker. So there was a long list of things I didn't want to be. So my first degree I pursued was, I became an accountant, a qualified chartered accountant, cost and management accountant. But while I was studying, computers were just beginning to happen in India. So I started learning computers, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it so happened by a quick quirk of fate that I was offered to teach the same course that I was studying in. I had not even completed that course. Before completing it, I don't know, I was just incredibly lucky, or my teachers were incredibly generous. They offered me a position to teach at the same institute, the same IT courses. And then, because of my background in finance and IT, I started conducting training programs for executives, for top level executives. So at the age of 24, I was conducting classes, executive development programs for top bureaucrats in the country. So my average age in my class would be 50 plus. Everybody else in my class, and they were directors of these huge companies who had 10,000 people working under them, 15,000 people working under them. And because the computers were just beginning to happen, the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had said that, all the heads of all the big corporates, all the the public sector behemoths, they have to necessarily go through a computer familiarization program, orientation program. So they had to enroll in this course. So I would do this very intensive 3 day program starting from morning till evening, 8 9 hours a day. So I started conducting those programs, and that's how I got into IT. I mean, I studied and then I started teaching. And then the third degree, which I pursued much later, about 10 years later, was urban management and planning, because I started applying. So my initial work, a lot of work was around information systems, because I had a degree in cost and management accounting. So computerized financial accounting system, budgeting systems, HR systems, and all of this. So I combined my knowledge of accounting and finance with my IT, and I ended up consulting a lot of firms and a lot of NGOs, a lot of development sector, small tiny little NGOs to medium sized NGOs and so on, and corporates, in putting these information systems. And then I was approached. I had a very dear friend who's a publisher, so he said, "Why don't you write?" So most of my books actually are on, or rather, all my books are on these topics related to management information systems, or information systems, or geographic information systems, and application of technology to business. How can you apply technology to business? And that has been a recurring theme of my work as well. Right. So systems analysis and design, all the IT related core, including from core IT as well as applied, how to apply that in various branches, or whatever you do, whether you're learning agrochemicals, or you're learning agriculture, or you're learning to be a architect. IT is something that we use technology in a very transformative way now in all aspects. So my books are to do with those. So that's why they are taught at graduate and in graduate, postgraduate courses all over. And I should clarify that many of these books. So I wrote the first few books for the larger market, which are sold generally in the bookstores. But many of these books, almost 100 out of these 174, more than 100 books, are specific books which universities commissioned for me. So universities said that we have this syllabi, and can you do a book for us? So most of these books are specific tailor-made books, which were many times created from an amalgamation of my existing books. So I took one chapter from here, from one book another chapter from another book, and then combined. So the number sounds very impressive. It is actually not that impressive. 178
I
sounds.
was quite impressed when I saw in your biography that's 170 books. I thought, wow, to write that many books takes a lot of time and effort. But I understand that it's mostly related to very specific curriculums, right?
Yes, and many of these books are co-authored. I am not the only author. There are other authors who have contributed to these books as well. So let's say about 40 of those books are authored solely by me, and but the remaining 130 or odd books are co-authored. There are other many, sometimes one, sometimes more than one. People have collaborated to produce that book.
Well, it's still, a very, very impressive, I have to tell you. It's amazing. Well, we had a question here from Vera Marinova, and thank you so much, Vera, for joining us. She, maybe Anya can put the comment back. She wanted to know if you could share a few examples of how individual resilience interacts with societal resilience and how they help improve each other. And also, she was
Sure.
asking if there is any research or resources or stories that have that can give us examples or proof of how this works. If you
Sure.
could please respond
Sure.
to Vera. Yeah, thank you, Vera, for this question.
Thank you, Vera. So let me pick up. There's so many examples come to me. Let me pick up an example which Victoria, you and I talked about. We talked about Bhutan, right? We talked about they have this concept of gross national happiness,
Right.
right? So let me give an example which perhaps might answer what Vera is asking. Bhutan is an absolutely fascinating country, right? It's as you know, it's one of the very, very, very few countries which are not only carbon neutral but carbon positive, right? They contribute more than they in terms of carbon footprint is negative. So and they go to great lengths to protect their rich kind of culture and their rich diversity and the green cover that they have, the forests that they have. So in 2016, I think if I remember the year correctly, they had a lot of rains, the torrential rains over there, and they have the main airport is in Thimphu, it's in a place called Paro, Thimphu, and there is a main line called Funchal. There's another place called Funchal, and that is where, because it's a landlocked country. Bhutan is a landlocked country. It shares borders with India and China. So most of the stuff, most of the goods, basically, they come from India. They land in Thimphu, and then they through road they're basically transported across the country. But because of this torrential rains, there were a lot of landslides. So the roads were shut down. Many parts of the main road through which all the supplies, fuel, and many other supplies, they were shut down. And as a result, you can imagine that food and fuel, right, which is coming from India to half of the Bhutan, basically, it comes through that route. So it was impacted, and the results were so catastrophic that the Bhutan's GDP, I think, fell something like 30-35% because of those floods. So that was the impact that it had. So because they have this, this gross national happiness, they are driven everything that in Bhutanese government does, any project, any scheme, anything that you do, you have to, specify. You have to be very clear how it will contribute to national happiness. So we through a World Bank partnership that they approached the World Bank, and we said, how can we improve our resilience? How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? I mean, you can't prevent the floods, but how can we improve? How can we reduce the impact, the catastrophic impact? So several things that the government then chose through World Bank funding. They invested in, for instance, one of the things they invested in is a weather forecasting system, right? And so if you have a better weather forecasting system, you at least know a few days, and in some case maybe only a few hours, but in many cases a few days in advance, something is going to happen, and then you can take preventive action. You can take some measures to counteract the impact. So this is one of the things that they did. So this is on the infrastructure side. How did they do this? They invested in this. They also developed some hydrological, some tools which will also increase their resilience and all. I'll not go into the details, but one is this side in terms of flood and weather forecasting, and basically to enhance their weather forecasting capability and reduce the impact of such disasters. The consequence of this was also that they were able to do more better predictions for the farmers. So the farmers, if they know in advance how much it's going to rain and when it's going to rain, then they can plan. They can alter their cropping pattern. They can decide which crop to plant. Because if there is going to be no rain, then you might plant a different crop, and if it's going to be a very good rain, then you might plant a different crop. So this in turn reduced the resilience. Increase the resilience and reduce the exposure of these farmers, because then they could decide to do a better plantation. Another thing that we invested is that we said one of the biggest sectors in Bhutan is tourism, but tourism happens mostly in protected areas in Bhutan. So one of the things Bhutanese government looked at, is to develop rural tourism. And why rural tourism? Because when tourists will travel in rural parts of Bhutan, then of course they will spread the gains. If you stay in a village, somebody's house will be converted into a bed and breakfast, so that particular household will earn more income. You will go around, you will have a meal. So the idea is that basically the tourist will contribute to the local economy directly, and thereby reduce the dependence on either agriculture or forestry, which are the two biggest, sources for people living in rural Bhutan. That those are the two natural, either people earn their livelihoods, or they do something to do either with forest products, or they do agriculture. So you are reducing their dependence. The more avenues you have for your livelihood, the higher is your economic resilience. So that if one thing is down, if by chance you lose your crop because of a torrential rain, then you can at least have something to fall back on if you're earning some money from the tourists as well. So we have just finished a program last year as part of a Buddhist circuit in South Asia. I was involved in that program. So we picked up a village in called Nupgang in Bhutan, which is in Punakha Valley, and we converted an old traditional house into a bed and breakfast and a restaurant. And then what we did is that the idea is the same, is that people will start going, and then they start living. They will live on the bread and breakfast. The restaurant will feed people. It will invite people, and we were promoting traditional Bhutanese cuisine. Many foreigners who one of the first thing that you want to do as a tourist, if you go to any country, is you want to experience the local cuisine. You want to see what is it like to live in a Bhutanese house. What is it like to eat like a Bhutanese does? So the house has been done up in a absolutely traditional, following the highest standards, of vernacular architecture. And we converted an very old historic house. This village happens to be the village of the Queen Mother, so it has a special significance as well. So now and then, increasingly, the community has come together, and what they have started doing, they have some very particular, the very unique local products like pickles, which they used to only make for themselves. But there is a big demand. Anybody who comes, who loves their pickles. So we said, why don't you start bottling them and selling them all over Bhutan? So we give them a bit basic technique. We did some training programs, and now they have their own brand, and they're selling all these pickles all over Bhutan. So thereby again reducing the dependence on any one or two sources of income. And now another problem, I may be taking longer, but this is a very interesting example. A peculiar problem in Bhutan, but not necessarily limited to Bhutan. Many other countries face this, including some very advanced countries like Italy and so on. That the villages are getting empty. None of the youngsters want to live in villages. Everybody wants to live in a big city, simply because there are no jobs locally in the villages. You can't earn a decent livelihood. So this also is encouraging some of the youngsters to come back. So basically, all the parents are left over traditionally in the village, and the youngsters go and work in the big cities in Thimphu or Paru or Punakha or wherever. So now, at least there is an option for some of the youngsters to come back and then live with their families, and with their aging parents, thereby again increasing their resilience and then access to health services and so on. Sorry, it took very long, but
No, this is a great example, and Bhutan is a fascinating country in that, as I understand, they measure their success as a country in happiness. Instead of measuring it in economic growth and success, they really measure it in happiness. And it's fascinating that you work there, and that you that you're, helped the government to do these things. So how does it work that they, and I think it's a wonderful example and kind of answers Vera's question about how building on the societal resilience to difficulties, it actually makes the rest of the population and the people more resilient and ultimately happy, right?
Exactly. The when we went to talk, I remember when we went to talk to the community, the first meeting that we had. So we asked all the village elders, what is it that you want? And the first thing they said is, we want our children back, because
Yeah.
all the children and grandchildren have gone moved to the cities. So above everything else, they want the children back. So we said, how can we get the children back? In order to get the children back, we have to have schools. We have to have schools for their children. We need to have a means of livelihood above all, so that they can earn a decent. If they can earn a decent wage within the village, they don't need to go. Everybody at least does not need to run to the city, big city.
Yeah,
So
this is
it's
fascinating. That makes me really curious. I mean, I would love to travel there and explore the country. Sounds,
yeah,
fascinating. Yeah, I hope
yeah,
that answered to an extent the question that Vera asked. I know we also wanted to move a little bit more into city planning and communities planning, and because you have a great experience in urban management and planning, and talk a little bit about the cities and why do we need resilient cities and why is resilience so important in planning infrastructure. If you can please elaborate on this question a little bit,
sure.
and I see. I think Vera is okay. Yeah, before we go there, maybe we can answer, because Vera asks again a question to both the host and the guest. What inspired today's topic?
I think we
She will
just
be happy to hear.
brainstorming.
Yeah, and then the
Victoria
short.
and I were brainstorming on what would be an interesting topic for somebody like Vera. So,
Yeah,
so
because we sometimes well, in our conversations and these perspectives, as you probably noticed, to those people who participated, who heard us earlier, we try not to go into too many technical details of consulting. Of course, there are many, but it would be hard to present everything in a sustained way, and also it might be a little bit boring for those who are not particularly interested in a narrow topic. So we're trying to talk about things that has global meaning, that are a little bit more, as some call it, on the softer side. But again, these softer skills, they sometimes become more important even that the hard skills or very specific technical skills. So yeah, I was asking Sanjay. He actually volunteered to go and be our guest speaker a while ago, and then we just talked about what would be an interesting subject. And because last time in our conference on February 1st, he talked about happiness, then I thought we could be talking in this line. And then of course he just came up with a resilience, because we've been living through very hard times and continue to living through hard times, both on an individual level and societal, with all the COVID and all the wars happening. And so that this topic just seemed very relevant to our time. And also Sanjay has a great experience in dealing with this. So that's my answer.
no, and I think as one thing that which fascinates me is the human interest. We do very technical work, and but ultimately it all boils down to people, right? It boils down to are we making? I mean, in consulting, and sometimes I dare say we use a lot of jargon, we use a lot of big words, and uh, but ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? We're just trying to achieve very simple things. We're trying to achieve the well-being of our people, right? We all want our societies to be happier above everything else, right? And so these human interest stories interest me more, much more greatly, and which is why increasingly, if I may say, I my last 10-15 years I've been working more. I used to do a lot of work on e-governance, so the e part has become smaller, as it should be. The governance part is much bigger, because without the governance there is no e. You can, any technology, good or bad, you can use it either way. I mean, the same electricity flows into geyser and it produces hot water, and it flows into refrigerator, it produces cold water. So it doesn't, that no technology, or whether it's artificial intelligence or big data or whatever these fancy terms, IoT, and I use them, and I do them a part of my work. But no technology good or bad per se, because I get asked this question also. I mean, what do you think? Artificial intelligence is a good thing, or it's a bad thing, or I mean, it's how you use it. It's how we as a humanity, how as a collectively we use it, is what determines what will be the outcome. And I think that's a great responsibility. And sometimes uh, we are not as responsible as we should be. That's all I'll say.
Thank you, Sanjay. I agree with you. Well, maybe we can move into the city development, since this is also the topic that is very close to your experience as a consultant, and talk a little bit about how you can mitigate risks and develop the ability of the cities to handle various events, and how to minimize the impact that these adverse events can have on cities. You can talk from the point of view of the urban management and planning expert.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Uh, so before I talk about resilience, let me talk a bit about the background, of why resilience is important, is becoming increasingly more and more important, and why all the big multilateral and bilateral development agencies are committing huge resources, huge budgets to improving resilience in the cities. I think there are three very interesting, kind of trends which are happening, and UN Habitat talks about all the three trends. One is that there are impacts of urbanization. We are urbanizing very, very rapidly, right? I think, if I remember correctly, we are already nearly 60% of the global population already lives in cities, and this figure is going to go up to 70% very, very soon. Similarly, almost 80% of our GDP, current GDP, is generated in cities. So that's where the wealth is getting generated, in the cities, right? And this is one side of it, which is that we are transforming. People are moving, and we talked about migration in the context of Bhutan, but of course, it's global phenomena. Everywhere, people are moving from rural to urban areas. That's one phenomena. This phenomena is also coupled by urbanization, that people are no longer live in. Look at what a wonderful medium we have. You are sitting there in North Carolina, and we are having this talk, and somebody from Netherlands would be joining in, and I don't know, some of our participants may be from anywhere in the world. The fact that all of us can come and collaborate, and we can talk about the same platform, just a couple of decades ago, and the fact that we can do it so easily and so cheaply, is has massive and profound consequences. The fact that, many of our entire, although we had the COVID pandemic had major negative consequences. I can't overstate them. I mean, the whole world was shut down, but the fact that we still continued was also, to a large measure, because of technology platforms like this. We could continue to be connected to each other. Otherwise, we would all become prisoners in our own home. The fact that you can pick up a phone and do a WhatsApp call with your friend or relative, 10,000 miles away. So this globalization of society is globalization, the economic the impact it has had on all the industry, that's also has major, profound impacts on how the cities function and how they deliver, right? So we talk about India, we talk about all this back BPO industry in India, the IT industry in India, the call centers is a more stereotype, but it makes a point that, how, if you call up a medical service, the chances are, if you call up a doctor or a hospital in US, the first line of kind of contact would be perhaps from a call center in India, in Bangalore somewhere. or if you're trying to retrieve your medical records or whatever, the helpline would probably be manned somewhere in Philippines or Bangladesh or India or anywhere. So this is a second mega trend which actually has had major impact on us, the way our cities function. And the third major thing is, of course, climate change, which we can't, except for some naysayers who choose to behave like ostriches and refuse to acknowledge. I think climate change has had profound impacts. And I was talking to somebody. We have a state, we have a province called Rajasthan in India. It's typically a desert state. And I was talking to somebody who lived in one of the cities there 40, 50 years ago, 45 years ago. And he said it never used to rain. He says, in my time, one day it rained in that city, and the entire neighborhood came out on the street celebrating because many of the younger kids had never seen rains in their life, right? And just last week, we are having floods over there. I have a friend who sent me photographs of of the same city being under flood. It has rained so much. So basically, there has been many, catastrophic sometimes, and other times not so severe. Fortunately, there have been, changes because of climate change. So these three mega trends are basically are propelling us to rethink how we design and how do we, manage our cities. It has had profound, implications on how we, how we think of cities in themselves. And because of these mega trends, we have to develop urban resilience. Because take COVID as an example, right? And earlier we were talking about that particular city was not planned for. They had never planned for rains, and now they have torrential rains. So resilience demands that we look at our cities in a more holistic manner, right? We and look at, holistically, not in only in terms of their infrastructure, but how the infrastructure can actually kind of cater to or respond in case of there are major changes or hazards. Just a couple of weeks ago, we all know about the heat wave in London, where people I was speaking to my friend in London, and he says, Sanjay, it feels like I'm in New Delhi. The temperature is nearly 40 degrees. And we all know what happened, because of the heat wave, because the entire infrastructure collapsed. Trains which were designed to be heated, they had no cooling mechanism, so their trains had to be stopped and cancelled in many cases, and many other which I don't. So therefore, I think now increasingly when we are designing our cities, whether it's our metro system, mass rapid transport system, or any other, we have to look more holistically, and we have to factor in things that we traditionally did not factor in. We have to assess, we have to plan, and basically put mitigating measures, right? So that if and when there is a disaster, whether man-made, whether it's man-made, like caused by an act of terrorism or whatever, or it's because of natural reasons, our cities are able to come up, are able to respond back, and they are respond back so that they don't shut down, and they can still continue to function, and deliver services. So that's the background of what the why urban resilience is becoming so important.
And what would be the components of making cities more resilient?
There are many components, but there are three. I would talk, rather than the components, I would talk, because you have to have resilience in all aspects of whether it's the transport sector, or it's your economic systems, or you pick up any sector, so all the sectors are vulnerable to risks. So I think we should think of resilience in terms of what are the dimensions. So I think there are three dimensions which we need to look at. One is, of course, the most obvious is the adaptive capacity. So there is an adaptive capacity, there is an absorptive capacity, and there is a transformative capacity. These are the sorry for using this jargon, but that this is one of the three terms which are normally used more often. So adaptive capacity basically is the city's capacity to make small incremental changes in response to changes. So if the climate is changing, and every year we find a pattern, for instance, if the rainfall is increasing and it's causing flooding in our cities, or the heat wave is increasing, it's becoming more and more severe every year. What are the small incremental changes that we can do we can make to mitigate some of these measures. Like for instance, in Delhi, I live in Delhi, which is perhaps one of the most polluted cities, if not the most polluted city in the world. It is one of the most polluted, especially the air quality is very, very bad. And the air quality is very, very bad for a variety of reasons, because there is very high degree of traffic, road traffic. We do have a mass rapid transport system, but it serves a very small portion. So we do not have effective, fully kind of, we can't say that we have a very efficient and effective transport system which caters to all the population. So everybody drives their own vehicles. So one of the things that one could do in case of if you wanted to improve resilience is to do the build the adaptive capacity, that basically, at least so now what they're doing is they're phasing out, they're incentivizing petrol cars over diesel fuel cars. They generate more higher content of GHGs, right? They are more polluting. So then the government is now increase the levy, and they have been doing it for many years now. Progressively, they're making the diesel cars more and more and more expensive, and they are also you can't drive a diesel car which is more than 10 years old in Delhi any longer. You have to retire, right? Whereas it's the life of petrol car is 15 years. They allow you to drive a petrol car for 15 years. So these are some of the measures that you would take to build the adaptive capacity. So you reduce the pollution. The idea is that you, in different sectors, you take different actions. So with progressively, with little bit, without major upheaval, you can reduce the impact of those consequences. The absorptive capacity would be to build the ability of the city as a whole to respond, right? To respond, so to shocks, any kind of shocks, right? And to minimize the impact both on the city itself, and of course what is city without the individuals and the societies. So basically, and the example that we could talk about is also that the Bhutan example is an example in absorptive capacity, that we are, instead of relying on only one source of income or only on one sector, if we are able to basically diversify our economy, so that if there is a global supply chain shortage, if supposing for some reason one industry becomes more vulnerable because either the supply chains coming from a particular country are disrupted or whatever, right? So then we are not held hostage and the whole economy doesn't die down. So you diversify the economy and make it more broad based. So that would be an example of how you would increase. So how you would do is like Singapore, where you will incentivize certain industries to come and set up shop there. You will incentivize certain kind of companies or some kind of whatever to come and work in your city or in your whichever geography. And then there could be a transformative capacity. This would be the capacity to basically, which can significantly reduce the impact or and vulnerability of some of the risks. So if your city happens to be, we are also working in Nepal, for instance, and what we are doing is we are designing a green resilient urban bridge in a city called Butwal, right? So there is a Lumbini province in where Lumbini province is where Gautam Buddha was born, and one of the cities in that province is called Butwal, and there is a bridge over there which is on a river, Tenau River, and we're building a bridge. But every year there are flash floods, and because of man-made reasons, a lot of man-made reasons as well, because there has been encroachment of the bridge on both sides. People have been dumping their waste on the sides of the river, so the river is becoming narrower and narrower and narrower, so that when there are flash floods, the water just spills over and that basically floods the entire neighborhood area. So you have to plan an engineering solution. You have to find ways how you remove these people. And there are people who are living under the bridge. In that case, there is a bridge already, but people are living under the bridge, and they're vulnerable. Every year, their houses get flooded. These are very, very poor people who can't afford to buy anywhere else, and that's the reason why they choose. This is the only place of so-called free land that they can, and they have easy access to water. So how do you now rethink the city and think of how we can actually think of solutions where you transform the city, you transform, you take some big decisions in how do you solve some of these problems. So these are some of these dimensions of how you create a more resilient city. I can go on, but I think I hope I've managed to give you a brief idea of what would be involved.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was great. Very, very interesting, and a lot to think about for consultants and for city governments, whoever interested in making cities more resilient, and the people who live in those cities also more resilient and ultimately happier. This is definitely a very, very, very good examples. Vera is also saying thank you for your answers and having brought up several important points about orienting the work, projects, etc., that is being done by a person, an organization, or a government. And that's what we tried to do today. We tried to move from an individual level to the city level and the government level on what can be done to make the cities, countries, and the people more resilient, so that we can all enjoy a better well-being in any circumstances, including the adverse circumstances. Anya is also saying thank you so much for all your insights. I picked up a lot of takeaways from this conversation. Well, that's great. That's what we're trying to achieve through our discussions, live discussions. And of course, if those who were not able to join, I understand sometimes we have a lot of things to do and timing is not always convenient, but all these broadcasts are actually, they stay on the social media that they are broadcast now on Facebook and on YouTube, and they're also all available on the foundation's website. So you can, anybody can always go back and listen to it again and just hear these insights from our wonderful guest speakers. And today I'm very happy again. And thank you so much, Sanjay, that you were able to join us and share all your valuable experience from all the years in consulting and just living and working around the globe. Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you so much again. Thank you for everybody who have joined. I do have already a name that I can announce as our guest speaker for the next event, which will be on September 1st at the same time. And that will be Azamat Timirkulov from Kyrgyz Republic. And he will talk about the green model, the green economy model of the Kyrgyz Republic. Azamat actually developed this model as an independent consultant, and he will be talking about how one independent consultant's idea became a government program, because he's now working inside the government on implementing this idea. So I think it's a great topic, and it's very much in line with what we are trying to discuss in our perspective series. Global challenges, and it's very much in line actually even with the topic that we are discussing today, resilience, because any movement towards a green economy in any country will certainly make it more resilient for anything that might be coming with regard to climate change or any other adverse events. Thank you very much again. It was a pleasure to have you, Sanjay. All the very best. We'll stay in touch, and we'll be happy to have you back anytime. Just let us know when you're available.
No, thank you so much for having me over, and I look forward to Azmat's talk next month.
Okay, wonderful. That would be great if you could join. So I wish everybody all the very best, and to stay resilient to whatever comes your way. Goodbye.
That's right. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.